Russia will be a force in end-time events, specifically, obviously, in Ezekiel 38:39. The bear is awake. Hey guys, everything new under the sun. I want to take a look at a couple of articles about Russia and the situation in Syria, and that Russia is really, really growing in power. They are basically um, um, sending a sign to the United States that if the U.S. or NATO wants to go to war with Russia, it's going to be a very costly war, and they're doing this by way of the situation in Ukraine. This is from shtfplan.com. Vladimir Putin is preparing for World War III, will force the West and Ukraine to make tough choices, according to this article. Putin is actively preparing for World War III, and his preparations are plans to make the West and Ukraine make choices that will be difficult, as he shows just how expensive it will be to wage war against Russia. According to the Kiev Post, an Israeli political analyst says Putin's war preparations are well in advance of forcing Ukraine, and the West must decide whether Kiev is an ally of the West or part of the Putin system. The Kremlin leader's actions are designed to show the West just how expensive, and that's an interesting word because I think an economic collapse is actually what takes Western nations out of the end-time biblical picture. So the fact that it's expensive is interesting. Interesting terminology, because I think in the last days when Ezekiel 38 does happen, I think it will be too expensive, literally, for the Western nations, including the U.S. as the current world superpower. It will be too expensive for them to battle against Russia and the alliance, Iran and Turkey and Libya and all the other nations, as they march on Israel. It will be too expensive for them. They won't be able to afford it. I think that's what the economic collapse does, and I think that's the part that the economic collapse has to play in the end time scenario. And I think the economic collapse comes first. And so, what do we have here? An article confirming that basically Putin is trying to make the U.S. realize that if they do want to go to battle against Russia, it's going to be, quote, expensive to support Ukraine against the Russian leader, or just to go against Russia in general. It's going to be expensive. And I think that's interesting. Great use of words, terminology there, because I think the next thing is an economic collapse, which takes them out of power, which is the exact thing that then enables Russia to march into Israel along with its allies during Gog-Magog, Ezekiel 38. This article here is from BreakingIsraelNews.com. Line between good and evil becoming clearer after major missile strike in Syria. This one says, last week a major strike claimed to have been conducted by the IDF penetrated into Syria, targeting Iranian Hezbollah bases. The attack carried out despite the protective umbrella of Russia. So another article claiming or confirming that Russia wasn't allowing this. This stuff just got by their defensive systems. The attack was carried out despite the protective umbrella of Russia, or as one rabbi described America's Cold War enemy, the prophesied enemy, evil enemy from the north. This is a Jewish rabbi saying that Russia is the evil enemy from the north, i.e. Gog-Magog, the leading nation of that Gog-Magog alliance. For just over 1 hour Thursday night, 15 Iranian and Hezbollah military sites in Syria were hit by the largest ever missile strike. The Syrian sources claim that Syrian air defenses shot down an Israeli warplane. This, of course, has so far been confirmed as not actually happening. RAI later amended that to say Syrians shot down several targets, not including an Israeli plane. Israel, of course, didn't speak about it. Debka did find out that they were long-range GPS-guided artillery weapon systems, or LoRa. That was part of the image you saw in the last second to last video, whenever I did that video with the image of the actual strikes that occurred. And these particular weapons have a range of 250 miles. But going on, it says, Director of Syria Observatory for Human Rights, Rami Abdel Rahman, said, It appears that the Israelis had intelligence that weapons had arrived there recently. So Israel knew that weapons from Iran had arrived at specific sites around Syria and on the border with Lebanon. And so they went in and struck. The strikes were successful, read this, despite the advanced Russian S-300 anti-air system being deployed in Syria. And I read a report that the deployment was complete, the setup and configuration was complete. So there was no excuse. So I think this is absolutely egg on the face of Russia. And this is part of the hooks in the jaw that brings Russia, turns them around, gets them frustrated with Israel basically, and has them march on Israel and lead the coalition to march on Israel. These are the first Israeli military strikes inside Syria since September, it says, when Syrian anti-aircraft fire downed a Russian plane, resulting in 15 Russian military being killed. And remember, this was a red line for Russia to join the battle and to bring their nuclear weapons to bear against the country that did it. Of course, the country that did it was Syria, because the Syrian military were manning the S-300 system at the time, which caused the death of these. So Russia could not go directly against Israel. Certainly, Russia doesn't want to start World War III, so they weren't. It's going to take a lot to go against Israel, anyways. But biblically, in Ezekiel, we know that there are hooks in the jaw that draw the leader of the north down on Israel, along with the allied nations, Turkey, Iran, etc. And the word there is plural, hooks. So there's multiple things that bring Russia down. And I think the embarrassment of the S-300 and not being able to stop Israel, Israel continually goes in there, with radar jamming, with different weaponry, with aircraft, etc. They continually go in there. I think it's very embarrassing. Look at this, though. Rabbi Pinchas Winston, a prolific end of days author and prominent Torah scholar, believes Russia's influence in the situation developing to the north of Israel adds strong messianic overtones. Check this out. Russia is very Magog-like. Rabbi Winston told Breaking Israel News. Hashgacha Pratit, divine intervention, is always there, pushing things towards Gula, redemption, vacillating from the obvious to the not so obvious. Iran is another major power in Syria who really has no power, is the power broker, balancing between communism and Shiism. At this point, anything, even something that seems insignificant, could be a trigger for the war of Gog-Magog. So even the Jewish rabbis see Gog-Magog being fulfilled in all the stuff that's going on, the strengthening of Russia in these last days, the placement of Russia in Syria, the placement of Russia as kind of the middleman, almost the peace broker, or not really the peace broker, but the country that kind of stands in the way and says, we want to help bring peace here, when really they're supporting Iran and other allies in the region. So these are the things that are going on, and the Jewish rabbis themselves are saying that this is very messianic, this is very provocative, and speaks to the return of the Lord in the last days, and they're likening it to Ezekiel 38:39 of the Gog-Magog war, the invasion of Israel. That's pretty significant. Again, this is Breaking Israel News. I'm going to put all the links in the description. You can check them out. Read them all, because I think they're fascinating. And here's an article about the U.S. U.S. is targeting ISIS in Syria strike, Damascus claims. The Syrian Sana state media said that the regime's forces were struck by several missiles in the area of South Sukna, a town on the road from Palmyra to Deir ez-Zor. The U.S.-led coalition targeted Islamic State. So U.S. is indeed, multiple confirmations that U.S. is indeed operating in Syria. Apparently with the agreement, there would be no way that they would go in without the agreement, without the no and the green light of Russia. Even if Russia didn't want to give the green light, there's cooperation there. They have an agreement effectively not to start World War III, because neither nation wants that. It goes on here. Syrian state media claim that the U.S. also hit positions in Syrian regime forces near a row of hills in southern Syria. And the conflicting accounts illustrate the complex conflict still being waged in Syria against ISIS. So you have ISIS U.S. going after ISIS, and maybe some Bashar Assad forces. You have Israel going against Iranian proxies, Hezbollah missile caches, missile shipments, etc. Seemingly either with a green light or basically just getting around any defensive mechanisms that Russia would have there. Certainly Russia is very quiet in Syria as of late. Have you noticed that? Where's Russia coming out and loudly condemning U.S. and Israeli attacks? They're not really there. I think that's because the spotlight will be shone on them as it relates to their inability, really, to prevent U.S. and Israel from striking targets, or their direct cooperation either is embarrassing to Russia in terms of its commitment to its allies, and embarrassing in relation to the failure of its technology, really, to keep and deter, I think more significantly, to deter the U.S. and Israel from striking. Russia probably put it in there as a bit of a bluff initially to hopefully deter Israel from targeting and doing strikes inside Syria. But that's okay. The situation has changed. Status quo is no longer, and so Israel just went about it a different way. So Russia probably had it in there as an initial a deterrent, but it's turned out not to be a deterrent at all, and Israel's gotten around it. So I think they will actually have to start really doing their best to make sure the S-300 actually works, and they may have to shoot down an Israeli plane or two to save face. I don't know what else they would do to save face other than the actual invasion of Gog Magog, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38. What else is happening in Israel? Well, IDF launches operation to neutralize Hezbollah tunnels from ynetnews.com. The IDF launched Operation Northern Shield on Tuesday morning to expose and neutralize terror tunnels Hezbollah has constructed along the Israeli-Lebanon border since 2006. So there's a bunch of images in here about, they're going in with bulldozers, and you can see the bulldozers and tractors there, where they're basically digging up these tunnels that attempt to go under the border wall. We've been preparing for this operation for 2.5 years with a standing operating procedure led by the IDF. This is the most blatant proof of the violation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that ended the Second Lebanon War, it says. The tunnels pose a risk to Lebanese residents across the border as well, and we see the Lebanese government as responsible for everything that happens north of the border. The fact that is that the Lebanese army does not control the area and doesn't take responsibility for southern Lebanon. Behind Hezbollah is Iranian knowledge and money, and we will deal with that in the coming days as well. So that indeed could be a prophetic statement in and of itself. The Lebanese army is at minimum not doing anything to stop Hezbollah from creating these tunnels, and more than that, likely colluding or just silently looking the other way so that Hezbollah can do this. So this is significant. The IDF added it had enhanced its presence and readiness in the Northern Command and is prepared for various scenarios. Key article here is that Israel is going to deal with Hezbollah in the coming days. I think we're close to some major strikes here. Probably see it now that the election of Netanyahu is put off until late spring. I'm not sure exactly when it is. It's late spring, summer, whenever it happens. This means that there's a window open for some more military operations because they never do those around elections. Not only that, you have the revealing apparently of the peace plan in January 2019, January-February timeline. That's the latest estimate for the Trump's peace plan to be revealed. And so I would suggest to you that the peace plan will likely be revealed when there's been significant war, when there's been significant escalation, because that puts a lot of pressure on both parties to come to the table and implement a peace deal. If you have peace already, or at least a quiet period, why then would you care about trying to work through a peace deal with Israel, since there's mostly already peace, there's not a lot going on, so there's no effort, there's no reason to really push through a peace deal. But I think the peace deal, the Antichrist is going to be able to push the peace deal through, it seems relatively easily, I think, because the world and the civilians of the area are desperate at that point, because they maybe are in the middle of war, are just recovering from massive warfare, And at that point in time, both parties are ready and groomed and fully interested in actually coming to a peace deal because of the war they were just in. So I think that's really how the Antichrist is able to push through a peace deal. So what does that mean? Before the peace deal, there has to be some great wars. There has to be some significant battles, and maybe even deaths and some significant warfare happening. And I think that's coming. Ezekiel 38, Isaiah 17. I think both those are coming. But before that, I think, is an economic collapse. Remember, Putin is trying to make it expensive for the U.S. or NATO to battle against it. That means economic collapse. When the economic collapse occurs, it will be too expensive for NATO nations to protect Israel, and that will open the door for Putin, for Russia, for Gog Magog, the alliance in Ezekiel 38-39, to march on Israel at that time. Putin knows that. He knows that it will be too expensive at a certain amount of time, and when he believes that the time is right and that it is too expensive for Western nations to march and protect and back up Israel, especially in Syria and in Israel itself, that's when Russia will make its move and march into Israel and try to take them out. And that's when God will show his power, when the IDF has no more power to stop the invasion effectively. So pretty fascinating stuff going on. A lot of stuff, background info going on. Interesting terminology used there from Putin about making it expensive for the West to wage war against Russia. I think that's prophetic. I think that speaks to the economic collapse, which is coming down the pipe very soon. And Putin probably has some indication. He's probably working with China to bring that about. And you can bet your bottom dollar that Russia and China know that economic collapse is coming at some point. They are building up their gold reserves and their military for such a time as that, and they are situating themselves, they were getting themselves ready to come out the other side of an economic collapse in power. And I think that's exactly what end-time Bible prophecy speaks of, Ezekiel 38-39. It speaks of a time after Western nations have collapsed from economic pressure and debt, and these other nations rise to power and feel that they can do whatever they want, and that's when God actually ends up intervening. Alright guys, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. I'll put the links in the description, and you guys can check them out. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. I hope you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. He's coming back soon, and Bible prophecy is being revealed as we speak. So get ready. Be prepared. Hard times are going to come. We are in easy times right now. This is easy right now compared to how it will get, and I think it will get hard quite soon. In the next 6 to 8 months, I think we're going to see some incredible prophetic revelation going on. If you haven't joined me on Patreon, please go to my support page on michaelgallant.com and consider supporting me on Patreon. It helps me with the time available to be able to make these videos, to be able to spread the gospel and to hopefully get some people saved. So please support there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.